Just was a really big believer in me and probably saw something in me then that, I wouldn't have the self-awareness as a kid to know. Ironically, like when I finished under 18s, I was probably not even a 50% foul shooter. I'm 6'3", and that's tall for a kid, but it's not tall by NBL1 or basketball standards. So when I went into the seniors, I had some rude awakenings that I wasn't as big as I thought I was. And that's my fault of just being a stupid kid. Cliché, but you wish you could have had someone to help you when you were that age. Yeah, I couldn't imagine being a kid these days. Like the amount, if we win a game and you win $5 and then you play hard, but if we play a game just to play and you don't play hard, then that's a big red flag for me on you. These days, kids probably just don't put in that extra work, which I just did by accident. Yeah, it was something I remember crying all the way home. Like I couldn't stop crying, and I was making up excuses. Very good questions, Dave. Humans are capable of some pretty nasty things.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. Today we're recording in my hometown Adelaide at the ARC Arc Basketball Stadium, the home of the Norwood Flames Basketball Club. My guest is enjoying a mocho while looking over the basketball courts. Recently we surpassed 2,000 plus downloads, and I thank the guests so far for courageously sharing their stories. As always, if you have been enjoying the discussions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, please do consider leaving a review and nominating a guest by contacting me. So today's guest is Will Smith. Will is the NBL1 General Manager GM and Head of Basketball Operations for the Norwood Flames Basketball Club. He has coached in several countries around the world, travelling to 38 different countries. Will is most passionate about developing young athletes holistically and having them reach their full potential as contributors to the world. He has a Bachelor of Education degree and MBA. His two degrees have intertwined perfectly with his recent basketball roles. He's an INFJ advocate personality type. Will, welcome to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan.
Dave, thanks for having me. It's awesome to be here and be on it.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on here, Will. Why don't we start by you introducing a little bit about your current role as NBL1 General Manager. What is the NBL1?
So the NBL1 is the second division league in Australia. There's 5 conferences now. We're in the Central. So there's North, South, East, West and Central. And there's probably, maybe 100 and something teams throughout the country at this level. I think it's pretty high basketball. A lot of people overseas sort of see it as a low to mid-major Division 1 college level. So it's pretty good basketball. I'm not sure if you saw recently, like Jack White, I know he's an NBL player, but he was playing NBL 1 maybe 2.5 months ago, and now he's signed with the Denver Nuggets. So I think the level of play is a lot higher than we probably take it credit for in Australia. I oversee both our men's and women's programs in that, and also juniors at the club as well.
Yeah, the quality of basketball is definitely very impressive, and it seemed to have improved a lot over the years. And in terms of your role of general manager, what does that involve?
So a lot of it, and I think we're trying to professionalise the NBL1 a lot. You might say it's a semi-professional league where not every player gets paid, but your key ones do. Like obviously NBL players who play down need remuneration, as they're just that sort of level of player. So it's dealing with player negotiations, any agent stuff, overseeing like the whole, scheme or program in terms of pre-season, during the season, what things can we be doing to make our players better, player development, scouting, video, game day operations as well, so setting up home games. It's really A to Z of NBL1 basketball on and off the court.
It's very exciting, and I'll try and get back to delve a bit more into the role after a bit more context about your experiences and your personality, etc. But I was having a chat with a parent, I think last Sunday, and I believe he went to primary school with you, and he shared that you were very good at football as a kid.
Yeah.
And maybe you have some family history with football with South Adelaide that you might want to
Yeah, interesting you found that. My grandfather, Reg, played for South Adelaide, and this is like going back in the 50s and 60s. And to my knowledge, was a player coach on their last championship team, which was, I'm going to say 63, which is a little bit sad. And yeah, I played football. I was, I guess you might say, a typical Aussie kid playing like cricket and football, and like that was your summer winter sports. I probably took up basketball later than, typically kids take up a sport. But yeah, I wasn't too bad at football at all, and I know my grandfather probably wanted me to pursue that more, but comes a point in every young athlete's life that they have to probably choose one that they go all in on. Yeah.
So when did you start playing football and basketball respectively?
I'm going to say I started basketball when I was 12 years old. So first year under 14.
Okay.
Which again...
Relatively late, I guess.
Yeah, it is, considering I was just like a footy kid before that. I probably started football in, I'm going to say, I was 8 years old at school. And again, back in those days, they used to have cones on the field, like for forwards, centres and backline. And you couldn't go past your zone. So I would just stand on the cone. I didn't know what to do. I didn't understand the game. I was just there because all my friends were there, and we all ran around, and it was something we did. So it probably took me a good, season or whatever to figure out how football worked. But then once I got into it, I enjoyed it and got better at it. Yeah,
that's awesome. And why did you then start basketball?
That's a really good question. I think it was something, again, just playing in the schoolyard at lunchtime, and was like, this is a different game, this is fun. I enjoyed it. Again, I thought I wasn't too bad in terms of I've got a competitive side to me, so I generally just want to win whatever I'm playing. But being probably a taller kid at my age, I could rebound the ball and do things like that and be successful. And yeah, I just fell in love with the team and also individual aspects of it. Not many sports are like that. Probably soccer is similar, where you can have individual flashes of brilliance, but also play amongst a team structure that can be beautiful as well.
I mean, now in terms of your professional role, you almost are devoting your life to helping other kids reach their potential and find that joy in the game and to develop their skills. So It's, I think, particularly interesting for me now to hear a bit more about how you kind of came to all your phenomenal achievements around the world. But so you started under 14, that was at Forestville, I believe.
Yes.
And what kind of level were you? So for context, I think in SA there's like Division 1, Division 2.
Yeah, so now I think about it more, I'm pretty sure I played one season of under 12s, but it was like church basketball.
Okay.
And it was for Tusmore. That was the team. I can't remember what they were, the Tusmore somethings. And I played one season there, and then there would kind of like now, trial information gets sent out. And again... there were players on the team who were going, and they just kind of like, well, we've got trials on for district basketball. And I was kind of like, what is district basketball? Like, I just was playing whatever I played and thought that was it.
Yep.
So went along to trials, and I actually went into Division 1. So
oh, wow, straight away.
Yeah, again, probably based on natural hand-eye coordination of football. And just being tall and long and probably being able to rebound and play defense and things like that was probably what got me there. And I always remember my coach, Scott Lewis. I'm still friends with him to this day, and I hope to catch up with him again soon. He just was a really big believer in me and probably saw something in me then that, I wouldn't have the self-awareness as a kid to know, but he saw something and obviously gave me that opportunity and sort of never looked back from that. Yeah.
Who else were your coaches in those early years, and what do you remember of them now that you're an adult and taking on a coaching role as well?
So Scott Lewis was the first one. So Scott and Brett are big Forestville sort of family people over the years, like in history. Really great people. Jeremy Coombe was another good coach. Jeff Whitford. Jeff was, again, big in basketball. His family, I think his dad is a life member at Norwood. He was friends with Brett Wheeler, who was an NBL player, quite accomplished back in the day, big, tall, 6'9", 6'10" guy.
Dean Whitford's?
Yeah.
Yep.
I believe
There was
so.
my
yes.
first coach. Yep.
Yes. So that's Jeff, and again, probably like you don't remember the coaching as such, and I mean that in a good way, in that they were just really good people. Like I remember going to Melbourne to play tournaments. Couldn't remember if we won or lost or whatever, but I just remember Jeff there in his leather jacket, and you know, he was a cool guy, and you know, we listened to him because we respected him and liked him. So those are the nice memories I have of it. And again, just good people. They always turned up. They were reliable. They knew their stuff, and I guess those are things that I draw upon for coaching as well.
I think one of the beautiful things about a community like the basketball one is how kind of people play themselves, and as they get older, they try and give back through coaching, and there's that intergenerational connection.
The circle of life.
Absolutely. And I was wondering, like, where are like some of your earlier teammates? Are they perhaps at the club in a coaching capacity now? Like, do I maybe know any of them who have played with you?
What, from early days or just in general?
In your junior days.
So like Matt Sutton comes to mind. Matt went on to play for the 36ers in NBL for quite a few years. He's now the Mount Gambier Pioneers women's head coach, and I think he just won Coach of the Year. So he's one. Wayne Hayden, we were probably three that played a lot together. Wayne played over in England at some point, and also last I heard is living in Canada as well. He's an accountant. We go along really well. I think there's a myriad of people that you bump into them, like not just from my team that I played with, but players you played against, and they're in roles now. And again, the circle of life comes full circle, where if you knew them and had a relationship, it's very easy to see them now and go, oh, you're at South Adelaide, I'm at Norwood. Let's talk about whatever this issue is in basketball. And it's way easier to navigate that than if you had never known them or played against them or whatever. And I think people respect each other because of how they played the game. And I think that was probably something to do with how I got my role at Norwood as well. Yeah,
so I think as people go through their junior days, obviously your game adapts and you kind of gradually build upon more skills. And you mentioned when you first joined that you've got kind of better hand-eye coordination from perhaps football. I think you were a bit taller. How did your kind of play style evolve in your junior days? Like, I would assume being a bit taller, you probably were more of a post player to begin with. And
that's probably a pretty fair indication of it. I'd say I was like a 4, maybe 5. Probably grew too early, and back in those days, again, we don't know what we know now about modern basketball in terms of, you know, multi-skilling bigs and all that type of thing. I was talking about this the other day with someone. Ironically, like when I finished under 18s, I was probably not even a 50% foul shooter. I would never shoot outside the key. It was just I would drive or make post moves, and that was sort of my game. And obviously I'm 6'3", and that's tall for a kid, but it's not tall by NBL1 or basketball standards. So when I went into the seniors, I had some rude awakenings that I wasn't as big as I thought I was, and I had to figure out other ways of doing things. And for me, that ironically was becoming a shooter. So I guess if you talk to people about my playing days, they would say that I was a shooter, but I never was until I hit seniors. And it was probably 3 years of practicing 3 to 4 days a week at what was the Clipsal Powerhouse. I was working there as a young kid, and 2 very good mates, Shane Breeny and Stu Breeny, we were working there, and our lunch break, we'd have an hour. We would eat our sandwich as quick as we could, and then we'd run onto the courts and shoot basically for at least an hour. Sometimes more if we got away with it. And yeah, that was sort of how I went from a terrible shooter into somewhat of a competent shooter. So that was a big evolution for me. Because again, you see it nowadays as a big junior, you can, you know, get away with bully ball or things like that that you just can't at senior level.
Absolutely, and the game has certainly evolved a lot in the past decade with the positionless basketball and the three-point shooting. And I guess, you know, if you watch under 12, under 14s now, even they are shooting three-pointers. I was just wondering, like, as you were kind of going through your junior days, what kind of goals do you remember setting for yourself? Like for me, for example, obviously like when I wasn't in Div 1, I wanted to play Division 1. When I made Div 1, I want to represent the state and the state teams. Was it a similar kind of motivation when you were growing up?
Similar, but also I think that's why I do have a passion for it now. As you know, it sounds cliche, but you wish you could have had someone to help you when you were that age. Like my mum was a single mum, and I guess I didn't really have anyone who understood basketball around me, and I was just fumbling my way through as a teenage kid. And of course I'm not going to make great decisions or see long term or have goals and things. So I was very much just a happy to be there sort of kid, wanted to compete, hated losing, loved winning, as a lot of kids do. And probably not until my older ages of like under 18s where I thought, why can't I make a state team? I never did. I believe I was the last one cut on one of the teams, and that was like under 18s. I was like the 13th player as such.
Wow.
And missed out, and then just thought, oh, well, I was not good enough. And again, just probably didn't have the awareness to make goals and things. I mean, stupidly, every kid wants to make the NBA, like stupidly or not, but reality is that there's other pathways or other goals that are more attainable.
So how present was your mum in your kind of sporting journey? Like, was she watching games? Did she understand any basketball? Did she train with you? What was that relationship like in terms of sport?
Mum was a really big supporter, so I'm assuming you spoke to Peter Ritchie, maybe. So he was a mate that I went to primary school with, who's now at the club coaching as well, which is great. And we were these multi-sport kids that we'd have football in the morning, like school football on a Saturday morning, and then maybe around lunch or one we'd have basketball, and that was like that church basketball. Sunday then became district training, Friday nights was district, so it was, mum always got me everywhere that we needed to go, and it was always with fun in terms of loud music in the car. Mum's crazy in a good way, and I know Pete has fond memories of that, but again, she probably didn't. She played like netball herself, so didn't really have an understanding of football and cricket and basketball that I was doing. So she never really was like, "Oh, you had a bad game today." It was kind of like, "Oh, you ready to go? Let's go!" Like, and in ways that was good because you see it nowadays with the bad parent who rides their kid, all the way to the game and then rides them all the way home in terms of, verbally, and you should have done this and could have done that. And I think that pressure can not be good. And I was probably lucky that I avoided that just through pure luck. Yeah.
What kind of student were you at school?
Probably like good, but
do you remember any of the comments from your kind of report cards and teachers' comments? Or
good question. Probably easily distracted, and maybe didn't apply myself as best as I could in terms of, as an example, in year 12, my best subject was legal studies. I think I got an 18 out of 20 or something like that, and I didn't study for the exam. And that's my fault of just being a stupid kid. You know what I mean? Like I'd go play basketball, I'd go play football, or I'd just leave it till the night before. And again, mum would probably leave me to my own devices, which was good in some ways, but then in other ways, maybe I procrastinated and just did kid stuff more than I should have at the time. So, and I think looking back, it was a bad attitude that I had in terms of if I found something easy, I then just wouldn't try at all, rather than like blitz it, if that makes sense.
I mean, kids nowadays have all sorts of distractions with their phones, with social media, with the access to a wide variety of information.
Yeah.
What was childhood like in Adelaide and Townsville at the time? Like you say, obviously you want to go play basketball, footy, but what else was available for a kid at the time?
I think in a good way there wasn't much else. I couldn't imagine being a kid these days. Like the amount of, like you say, distraction and online, bullying or drama or whatever you want to call it that goes on. It just distracts kids from what is really important in life. But at those times, it was really, again, in the 90s, not much else to do. You might play Super Nintendo, Super Mario, but it was, again, the houses, typically we had one TV, so if mum was watching the news, I couldn't play Nintendo, so I would go play basketball, like at school. Like I'd just go hang around the school after school or whatever. So again, there wasn't all these devices and screens that if you didn't get one, you'd go to another. In Townsville, I remember riding my bike. I played on 3 teams up there, and I remember riding my bike to games, and it was like a good hour bike ride. And it was the Ross River up in Townsville. I remember driving around that, riding my bike and going to the stadium to play, and then I would drive an hour home, and that was just what you did, and never thought much of it.
When you look back now, obviously, as an adult and having coached, managed and played, what kind of attributes or things you did, whether intentional or not at the time, do you think most contributed to your success?
I think probably having that competitive characteristic, which you kind of really have or you don't. From a coaching perspective, I think there's certain things that you can do to emphasize it or promote it. But I think that's really, really key, is just like intrinsic motivation, if we want to start going into coaching stuff. Like, you know, if we win a game and you win $5 and then you play hard, but if we play a game just to play and you don't play hard, then that's a big red flag for me on you as a, you know, a player. Like, you need to want to do well all the time. And I think that relates to being process driven rather than just result or outcome driven. And so I probably had that as a kid. Like I said, I just hated losing. I would be very crappy if we lost. And then probably, again, by accident, had put in a lot of work. So football as well, you know, if I wasn't doing basketball, I'd go and kick the football. Like, I'd find an oval, be there for a couple hours, kicking at goals and whatever. So, and again, it's not a cliche of, oh, you need to practice more. It's like, literally, you might spend 10 hours a week playing football and 10 hours a week doing basketball. And then cricket in the summer would take part of that. So, yeah, these days kids probably just don't put in that extra work, which I just did by accident.
Something I found really helpful, and obviously I've not reached anywhere near the level that you have reached in terms of playing or coaching, but something I found helpful growing up was always having like people to anchor myself to, and often they're friends or competitors who are slightly better than me, but I feel like with an extra hard work I could also get the skill that they have, and that continually just incrementally pushed me. Did you have a friend, kind of friendship rivalry, that kind of stuff when you were growing up, and just someone who you go, wow, he is good, but I can be at his level?
Again, I was probably lucky with that Forestville group that we were really talented. Like, a number of players ended up going on to NBL1 and NBL. So, you know, I played against Darren Ing and Oscar Foreman and Jacob Holmes in, like, they were a year, well, Darren was my year, but the other two were a year above. So it was like every second year I'd play them. They'd kick your ass, like you say, but it would spurn you to go, well, man, we got to be better. Like, these guys are killing us. So there were probably competitors like that. Like Darren Ing was a big one that, being in the same year, you constantly were just playing against each other, and he was obviously a tremendous player. Yeah, he played, 7-8 years in the NBL. Really wiry guard, could shoot the hell out of the ball.
While doing his medical degree.
And he's a Saints guy as well. So he was probably a big one in that junior sphere. And again, probably through dumb luck, playing against older kids. I remember in Townsville, as an under-14 kid, being invited to play, like it was, say they would say, hey, 8 o'clock on Saturday, come to the Arc and play these under-18 guys. And I was like, no idea who they were or anything, and I don't even really know the person who invited me. It was just some guy who was like our coach's friend or something. And so I would go on the Saturday night and play against these older guys, and again, really hard and struggled compared to playing in under-14s. But then looking back, me doing that for 6 months probably helped me a whole lot. So there were probably bits and pieces like that of playing against people that helped me. And it's something I try and do today from a teaching perspective. You'd call it scaffolding, where you're putting people against those above them. So from a high school perspective, you might get old scholars in to play against your team, and they're going to lose, but they're going to get better. We're doing it now in terms of for our under 14 teams who are going to club nationals at the end of this month in Sydney. We're scaffolding them in terms of the 14-1 girls have played the 14-2 boys, and the 14-1 boys are playing the 16-2 boys. So they're outmatched, but it drives them and pushes them to find ways that they otherwise aren't pushed to find.
I know it's easy, and certainly for me as a young player growing up, when you look at an older player who is very accomplished, say they're making the state teams, they're obviously doing very well, and often it's easy to ignore or not realise that throughout their development there would have been points where perhaps they also thought about giving up, perhaps they had terrible games and miss out on selections and just disappointments that people don't usually show on a CV or on a mixtape. Did you have any of those like major disappointments throughout your junior career? Could be a moment, it could be a selection.
There's probably, like, as talented and good as those junior Forrestal teams were that I was on, we probably didn't achieve what we should have. And maybe that was just, we didn't have that high game experience, that, I guess, that nous, you might call it. When the big game's on the line, how do you get it done? So that was one. I do remember distinctly, I think it was a under 16s game, ironically against Norwood, and it was like a knockout final. And there was this, I think we lost by a point, and this guy hit a game-winning shot, and it was on me. And it was something I remember crying all the way home. Like, I couldn't stop crying, and I was making up excuses, the referee and this and that, and just, again, that was the competitive side of me, but that sticks in my mind of a moment that sort of feeling really, really bad because of the outcome of a game. And I remember I had a hand up on the guy, like I pretty much did everything I could, and he just made a really tough shot. But again, I was by myself and just thinking the worst, and didn't have someone going, "It's all right, don't worry, it was a tough shot." But it probably drove me to get better and better again. I do think it's very important for players to have hard knocks. I don't want teams to go a season undefeated and win the whole thing. I don't think that's good for a young person's development.
So you've coached around the world, and you've coached in USA at the St. Louis Christian Academy. You've coached in China for the NBA China Academy. You've coached in Australia, you've coached in Europe, and obviously each of those places kind of have their different culture and way of doing things. And I was wondering, given your interactions with very elite players, what are kind of two things that separate the good players from the great players?
Very good question. Again, I would say the competitive side of it. And probably as you go up levels, the attention to detail. So, we have players out here who are shooting the ball. Not a great looking jump shot down there. It's a bit of a corkscrew and whatever. It's the best players will self-analyze and give themselves constant feedback, or they'll seek it out from a coach or someone. So, they'll want someone to come to a workout to give them that constant, how's my shot looking? Is it in? Is it out? Is it on? Did I miss? But was it good? They sort of seek that out, and that's that attention to detail.
So it's like a humility to be corrected and know that you've got a way to go.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good way to put it. But also just like, yes, I maybe scored on that play, but did I do it as best as I could have? Did I miss the guy who was open and not make that pass? So it's the ability to, again, be process-driven rather than just, we made the shot, it was good. A lot of great players have that and will seek that. And the competitive one, I just think, like, we can talk about it all day long. And you've been training with our under-21s on Thursdays. Like, it can get competitive, right? Like, guys are wanting to win. But there's very different levels amongst the group in terms of who really wants to win all the time. And some people who are okay with losing. It's probably not a good thing. Yeah.
And when you coached in China, I'm quite interested in, obviously, being Chinese and having spent a part of my childhood there. What was that like? In China, I'll give you an open question. What was that like?
Eye-opening.
In what sense?
In many different ways. It at the time was really, really difficult and hard, but looking back, it's something that I am very grateful that I did. And it was more for the life experience and eye-opening.
Was there a language barrier for you?
It's probably more the culture that was a problem. Yeah, so language for sure. Like, I was in Shenzhen, which was in the south. It was like, a stone's throw from Hong Kong. Like, literally, you're looking at the border. You could go there in half an hour and you're in another country. Hong Kong, quite westernized, a lot of English. Again, anecdotally, in Hong Kong, you could go to any restaurant and someone in there would speak English. You could find someone, probably, 4 or 5 out of 10 would speak English, I'd say. China, that number goes down to probably 0 to 1. So, yes, there was language issues. I kind of learnt Chinese to get through that out of a survival sort of technique. I'd always wanted to learn another language. I never set out to go, I want to learn Chinese, because obviously everyone says how hard it is. But yeah, did it while I was there. But it's the cultural stuff that really was the huge difference.
What are some of the misconceptions people here, having not lived in China or not worked in China, would have about China?
I think typically people, might think China's poor. Like, the village images you might see on a news story of, people living in a small dwelling and there's dirt on the outside and, they're poor and all they eat is rice. Like, that's a very, I don't know if I'm wrong. Is that a typical sort of view sometimes you find?
I'm not sure.
But very, very wrong in terms of some of the most modern cities in the world. Like Shenzhen was called the Silicon Valley of China. I remember being in my apartment after I was there for a month or so, and I was sitting, I can't remember what, 16th floor or something, and I looked out the window and I counted, I think it was like 75 skyscrapers that I could see. And that was just on my side of the building. So I sat there, went across the horizon, 1, 2, 3, 75. We don't even have 75 in probably 5 cities in Adelaide. You know what I mean? Like, huge skyscrapers just dominating your view. So, yeah, I think China's a lot more modern and advanced than people probably think in terms of, yes, you go out to those small villages and it is like you think. And again, I think we touched on it before we started this, that, yeah, there's 2 sides to every story, and often what media or, people put a story to, you have to think what's their motive or angle on giving that story. And it does seem to be a very much a West versus East, battle going on in terms of whether we call it a Cold War or what. There's just 2 sides who are trying to posture themselves.
Why did you personally take up the role in China?
So I was playing NBL1 and was sort of getting towards the latter years of that. I was never really a good player. And I'd started coaching at St. Peter's, and I was doing that for 2 or 3 years. And we had a coach at Eastern Mavericks. I'll tie this into your answer, to your question, sorry. And our coach left, and the club came to me and like, Will, you're our oldest player. And I was like, oh, thanks. But also I'd been coaching at Saints, and they said, obviously, we've seen you've been doing well. We think we want you to coach the NBL1 team. And it wasn't something I was thinking of at the time. I was like, I'm still a player. I thought of myself in that way. But I realised that the end is nigh and we can't play forever, and was sort of looking towards coaching. So I did that NBL1 job for 3 years, but it came to a point of you want to call it a passion/obsession. And, I had a day job, but, all day long you're thinking about basketball and you're waiting until, practice is at 6 tonight, and you're making plans and that drove you. So, had a relationship breakdown at the time. And it was just, I guess, an opportunity to go and try something new. And I wanted to make basketball a full-time gig, that's what I did for an income. And at that time, it was not very easy to get a role like that in Australia, and Adelaide in particular. You could get part-time roles here and there, but that doesn't pay the bills and get the job done from a financial perspective. So this job came up at an academy in China, and I sort of got the job, and it all happened very quickly, and I was in China on a plane in China pretty quick. So yeah.
Why do you think they wanted you?
I think they like foreigners in terms of people who know basketball. A lot of local Chinese coaches probably aren't very well educated in basketball, and probably don't know how to get the best out of their athletes. So that, probably having the NBL1 playing and coaching experience and high school experience were the big differences at that time.
When you look back at those times in China, what were one or two of the signature contributions or achievements that you've made?
I'd probably say there was a school I coached at, Nanshan's second foreign language school. They couldn't come up with a bigger name, I don't think. That was the name of the school, and I coached their high school team. And again, this is another funny example of how China's different. We probably trained for, I'm going to say, 6 months, and we had one tournament for the year, and that was it. So we trained from like January all the way through to like June or July. We had this tournament. It was like the city basketball tournament, and we ended up actually finishing 8th in the whole city out of like 128 teams. So, and it was a school record. Like that school, they have group stages where in Shenzhen they have districts. So it's kind of like that movie District 9. They have probably 6 or 7 main districts. We were in Nanshan, and you play off against all the schools in your district, and then if you win that, you go to like the next level. And our school had never made it past that initial district zone. So we played, group stage games. I think there was five or six group stage games that you just randomly get put against teams randomly. I say that with inverted commas. We won through that, and then won through to the knockout rounds, and then got knocked out by, I think, the team who finished second. So, to finish 8th, for me, that was a huge achievement, just in terms of the language and the cultural issues, and trying to take a team to play a foreign style. And, by no way, shape and form were we the most talented team at all. Like, other teams were recruited and stacked and been playing together for, multiple years. So that was probably a big one. And then really it was, I guess, just the impact in kids' lives. Like, again, it sounds cliche, but, having kids that you still message now on WeChat or whatever, and they'll say, "Hey coach, how you going?" Like, for me, those are wins in terms of you made a positive impact in their life. There was a few who went over to college in America that I helped, which was nice as well, that otherwise they would never have that opportunity. So, it's things like that you can transform their lives for the better. But from a basketball perspective, it was probably that high school team that was the big one.
So, I guess being able to kind of play a small role, or in your case, perhaps a much bigger role, giving them a transformative educational opportunity, is something that seems to be the top thing that coaches answer as to why they coach and why they devote so much time. And coaching is certainly a role that you can't just switch off when training ends. You're always kind of thinking about the kid, not just their basketball, but their perhaps personal life, family life, and supporting their overall development. Did you ever feel burnt out or overwhelmed or helpless?
Oh, of course. Yeah, do you mean in China in specific, or just anywhere?
Not necessarily, as in...
I think it's a constant thing. Like, it's a battle right now. I look at it, from a leadership perspective of, like, I guess I'd call it servant leadership, where you give yourself to everyone else, and you sacrifice, whether it be your own family time or body or whatever, or mental headspace, like you say, for the betterment of others. And I really do believe in that, and I try and walk the walk as much as I talk the talk. But for sure, it's a really big issue. And again, as I've gone along the years, I find it really important to try and catch a balance. And it can be just doing something for yourself, like, I don't know, watching a Netflix show or playing PlayStation or something that just takes you away from all of that constant mind chatter. Because like you say, otherwise it can be very obsessive and very, not controlling, but probably just obsessive for coaches.
So what drives you, Will? Because I know you talk about balance, but I always see you kind of on the court, kind of helping people, kind of going beyond your job title and, staying around after training to help someone with their shooting or talk to their parents, which, why are you always giving so much?
Well, you mentioned my personality thing. Probably I have a large sense of justice in my personality. Maybe that's why I was good at legal studies. That I wanted to make sure there was justice. At the time, didn't realise that, but yeah, I probably have a big sense of justice and moral, and having a moral compass. And I just think it's the right thing to do. Like if I was that player or that parent, and that I am their coach, but if I was that player and someone else is my coach, I probably would expect that or think that they should be doing those things for me. And yeah, I think it comes back to that competitive thing of just wanting to do the right thing for the sake of the right thing, not for extra money or extra whatever, or like social media status or something. It's not that. It's just doing it because it's the right thing to do by that person. And I'm a big believer in getting a player or a person to an opportunity that they deserve. And like about those kids in China going to college, it's the same thing. Like they were good enough to go there, and if I could connect, dot A and dot B, and that means a kid gets an opportunity that they deserve, then that's a great thing. Like that's what life is about.
One of the things I found from my coaching, sometimes kids go through rough patches, either at school or family, and obviously as a coach you don't always know. And what I'm trying to say, I guess, is poor behaviour on training, it isn't always the kid's fault, and you kind of got to understand the full picture. And even if a kid isn't respectful or isn't working hard, doesn't mean that kid won't be able to do well years down the track, and having that long-term perspective.
Yeah.
How have you found dealing with kids who perhaps don't yet have a great attitude that is required to perform at kind of their potential?
Good question. Probably there's one who springs to mind this year that I'm currently coaching.
Let's not mention names.
No. And he's gone through a really good development, but there was I guess you'd say a bit of tough love early on, in terms of, again, I'm not just going to scream and shout. That's not my style, but I'm not just going to do that at a kid. It's, let's have a catch up. Like, let's have a coffee. What's going on? Why are we doing this? And a lot of those kids aren't, like I said, similar to myself, aren't self-aware to go, I had a bad day at school and then I came to training and I lashed out. It's sort of like you've got to string that out of them and go, what happened today? Oh, I didn't have lunch. My mum gave me crap about whatever. And you sort of go, oh, okay, so has that affected your mental state before you've come to training? Yeah, I'm not feeling that great. Oh, but they haven't thought about that themselves. They've just gone through the day. These things have happened and they're feeling a certain way and don't realise it. It's a bit odd, but again, phones and whatever, they're probably distracted and just maybe haven't been asked these questions. But I think, yeah, there's a bit of standard setting, and then keeping them accountable as well to that. And a lot of it is behaviour stuff. It's not necessarily basketball. It starts with behaviour, and then, if it's get to training early, warm up, be ready. If training's at 6, we're good to go at 6. Like, whatever the case may be that you set a standard as a coach, then it's, okay, we're playing pick and roll. What's our screen coverage? Same thing. There's a standard you got to meet. You're not meeting it. Dave, why aren't you meeting it? So I think it's just being able to ask those direct questions helps. But also, last year there was another kid who had some troubles at home and things, and it also can be putting boundaries in place that, lets them know that there's a line that they've got to and they can't keep stepping over it. Otherwise there'll be consequences, whether it be, they're suspended or out of the team or whatever.
You mentor a lot of younger coaches, and what are some of the main challenges that coaches at this community level find when they coach, and what kind of advice do you give them?
I think probably a lot of coaches want to know everything, and it's a little bit like, you know, if I'm a marathon runner and I'm in the 5,000 meter or whatever, I can't just turn up tomorrow and go 5,000 meters. I mean, I can, but I'll not be great. But the idea is like you maybe run 1,000 meters a few times, and then you go, oh, okay, 1,500, 2,000, and you build up to being a 5,000 meter runner. And that's what I've looked at with coaching is coaches, and again, it's this virtual instant gratification world of Instagram and whatever. They want to go from the 0 meters to the 5,000 meters in, you know, 6 months or a month. And it's like, how do I get this cheat code to go to here? It's the same as the playing, like I said, with shooting. I didn't just do shooting for 1 week and I was a shooter. It was years of practice of doing it and sticking at it.
Lots of disappointments, I'm sure.
But I think it's the same with coaching. Like, it's just try not to get ahead of yourself. Try to keep learning. And again, if you spread yourself thin in terms of, if there's 5,000 meters worth of information or knowledge that I want to get, if I just go and open that door up for you, you'll be overwhelmed and confused, and you'll probably run all the 5,000 meters poorly. But if I give you a few hundred meters worth of information at a time, you can get really good at it, and then you can go to the next step. That's probably a big one that I see with coaches. They just want to know it all straight away. And I also believe that I can't give you all the answers. Like, A, I don't know everything, but B, you know, you need to come to your own conclusions sometimes. If I just tell you everything all the time, it's like playing. You know, you set up a one-on-one, you know, 3 dribbles, catch a ball outside the 3. Like, you set up the construct and then go, okay, go play with it and be creative, find your own path, find your own answers, and be experimental. Like, what works for some coaches or playing groups isn't going to work for others. But I'm a big believer in, like, I can't give you all the answers as a coach.
Your humility, I think, is something I've always really admired about you. And, you know, despite all your kind of wealth of experience, you would always ask questions and you would always take the time to listen. And I was wondering, was there anything over your career playing and coaching that you previously perhaps really believed but later on changed your mind?
It's good, very good questions, Dave. Do you mean from a coaching standpoint or basketball or just in general?
Could be anything, just a deeply held belief, and that you maybe through interaction, through an experience, through a conversation with someone, that you've evolved and changed your mind on.
Again, probably China was a big part in that. A friend of mine, Nick Plosser, he lives in LA. I call him LA Nick. I met him in China when I was coaching there, and we had a lot of, I guess, conversations about life and the world and philosophy and whatever. And yeah, he was probably one who changed my views on it. I think from Australia, we can have a very sheltered mindset of this is how the world is. Like, you know, little old Adelaide here, it's very safe and friendly and everyone's nice, right? But you go into a big bad world where people, you know, crap on each other for $5. That probably changed my world, going to China in those regards, in terms of probably seeing things a bit more for what they are, and that humans are capable of some pretty nasty things. But then also appreciating how nice it is in Adelaide. Like, I came back before COVID, and having been everywhere, I would not wish to be stuck anywhere else in the world during COVID than Adelaide. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Like, yeah, there's a nasty side to the world, and I think particularly in the Western world, and I keep relating to Adelaide or Australia, we have a bit of a skewed world that's how it is for everyone, but they also have the same view that Chinese people think that that's how the world is for everyone too, how they live in China. So that's probably a big one for me, is just knowing how the other side lives and works, and being aware that there is another side, and then questioning what you do all the time to see if there's a better way.
So you're big on curiosity and reaching understanding and empathy, and you also seem to be quite big on personal development, perhaps from the competitive spirit that you continually allude to. What do you do that perhaps not many people know, but it enhance your personal development? Like, do you read books, listen to podcasts? Do you do mentoring sessions? How have you gone about to self-initiate your personal development?
Probably all of those things. Like, one thing I did like about China was that because I didn't know the language so well, if you went into a room, and these again are like human things that I had to learn, if you go into a room, like say this room we're in now has 50 people and they're all speaking English, you hear what they're saying. Like you can hear mum and dad talking about pizza for dinner, and you hear the little kids saying, you know, where's my dog or whatever. But in China, when I didn't understand, your brain switches, like flicks a switch and goes zone out. It just becomes white noise. It's just a babble. And in ways it was good because then you could focus into yourself, I found, like never before. So I could listen to a podcast on a bus and a train and know that no one talking around me would distract me because I didn't understand what they were saying. So that was kind of like a good thing where I could listen to podcasts a lot more and read books and miss bus stops because I'm like, oh, I was just reading a book, I missed my stop. And that's a good mistake to make because I'm so into a book. I don't read so much anymore just because having 2 young kids and the role I have, I really don't have time. It's something I miss doing. I've got books lying around that I keep buying and just haven't read. That's a big one. I find it, again, good mental sharpness to read. I also probably I'm lucky to have a good network of basketball people around the world, and I constantly ask questions. There's a coach at Yale that, you know, I stay in contact with regularly. As an example, I just messaged him this morning, Matt Elkin, really good guy, and it's like, hey, what do you guys do for benchmark testing, for shooting and player development? This is what we do here in Norwood. What do you do at Yale? Do you have a playbook you can share? I'll share you my playbook from the under-21s this year. So that's one example of just trying to reach out to people who aren't where I am constantly to get different ideas and ways of doing things. Because again, as much as I love Adelaide, sometimes we can be a very small town of this is how we all do it, so why are you doing it differently?
You mentioned books, and I don't know if you ever give people books, but
yes.
If you were to, or if you do give people books, are there 1 or 2 books that you continually choose to buy for others? And if so, what is it?
Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, and probably The Alchemist.
Oh, nice.
So I read The Alchemist while I was overseas, and that obviously was a bit more profound because of where I was and the irony in the story of the book. And then The Old Man and the Sea is that thing of, like, I often will give that to young guys. I've given it to people who haven't read it and they've given it back to me. And I've given it to others who have got halfway through and, oh, this is boring, I don't get it. Have you read it?
I haven't.
You haven't? Well, could be something to get for you. But it's just, I don't know if you want me to spoil it.
Go on. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
So it's an old man and he's a fisherman. Lives in some fishing village, I can't even remember where, let's say England. And there's this, I guess, folklore going around of this big fish. You know, call it it's not Moby Dick, but it's something like that. There's a big fish out there, we've seen it, you know, people hear of it, you know, it's a myth, it's a legend, is it true or not? And all of his life, this fisherman is, you know, essentially chasing this fish. And he's going out to sea and he's, again, sacrificing everything. He goes out to sea, he captures the fish, and he has a battle with it so bad that he basically almost dies. So he's out at sea, he's got no water, he's on a boat passed out, the sun's on him, etc. He's probably not going to make it back. So he goes through, you know, are people going to know that I caught the fish? Like, my whole life I've been doing this and no one's going to believe me. I'll lose the fish, I won't have it. You know, he's trying to bring the body back to show people. And then he eventually comes back, and it's like the middle of the night or something, he drags it up, leaves it there, and the next morning no one can find him. And he's gone out fishing again. So it's this thing of, again, I do like reading a lot, and Buddhism, I guess, strikes a chord with me. Chop wood, carry water. I don't know if you heard that one. Chop wood, carry water, gain enlightenment. Chop wood, carry water. So it's chop wood and carrying water is what you do to survive or to get through life. gain enlightenment, which is like the ultimate thing a Buddhist could do, yes, like the epiphany moment, and then you just keep going. And it's, I think, not Moby Dick, The Old Man and the Sea is very similar in that it's the process of it, the journey, not just getting the fish and then you're done. And he went out again, he's like, well, I guess there's more fish to catch, or why do I stop now? And I think basketball is the same. It's like you can win the championship is the goal, and how many times you hear the championship hangover, like the player or the team or the coach just can't do the same afterwards because they've attained something that they've been maybe going 10 years towards. I remember the 2004 Port Adelaide Power when they won the AFL, and it was like, I remember at the time people were saying it was probably the best and worst thing that could ever happen for that group, because they were young, they had all this potential, they were up and coming, and the next few years were not great because they'd attained this holy grail and then they couldn't mentally keep chopping wood and carrying water and doing all the things that got them there.
So how do you help a young player keep perspective, either when they get cut from a state team that they perhaps should have made, or when they attain the state team that they've worked for years to get and they go complacent? How do you help them to see the longer picture, that this is only one step of their development?
So we talked about goal setting before, and I think like that constant feedback cycle is important, and it's often related to goal setting. So yes, little Jenny, you made the team, but you still can't shoot threes. So you still need to work on your threes. You did a great job making the team. You've got to keep working on your threes. And again, that's probably process over outcome driven. And then, you know, the flip side is, yeah, you didn't make the team. Why? Why not? What's that feedback from the coaches, or what's your self-reflection? Okay, I can't shoot threes. Maybe my left hand is weak. Okay, well then you know what the answers are to get to work on. Like, are you going to sit there and give up, or are you going to go and practice and get better at those deficiencies that you have? So I think no matter what you do, there's always something to improve upon. And that's part of that journey for me.
How can players, I know Basketball SA is going kind of from strength to strength, and there are lots of good coaches at different spots, and as you go through your junior career, you kind of interact with a lot of them. Either they have coached you, but how would you recommend a player to take advantage in the good way of the network here and to develop their all-round game?
I think, again, probably seeking that feedback from a lot of different coaches. It does seem to be a thing that often coaches either don't have time, or they think that players aren't interested, or maybe they don't want awkward direct conversations of, Dave, you're good at this, but you're not good at this. And so coaches might avoid it, but if players can go and seek that out and do it in an open-minded way and actually really take it on. Like the typical thing is, Dave, you can't shoot threes and your defense is terrible and you can't rebound. And
Sounds
Dave,
about right for me.
as an example, but young Dave or whoever goes away and goes, I can shoot threes, I can rebound, my defense is great. And they just make excuses or counteract it, or don't have that open mind. Like they find a reason to counter whatever the coach has said. And then it's like, well, you lost an opportunity to get better. Even if you don't agree with it, you could maybe delve more into it. Like maybe I meant defense off the ball, and it's just your help split line defense isn't good. Maybe one-on-one on the ball and pick and roll, you're great. So it's getting really nitty-gritty in the feedback and just asking more coaches around the place. And if there's a common theme, if you ask 5 coaches and they'll say your defense off the ball isn't good, then you go, okay, maybe it's not. But if one coach says it and you can say, well, maybe they only saw me for 3 games and I didn't do it in those games, maybe that's an anomaly. But yeah, if you seek out feedback from multiple coaches, you can get a pretty good picture of yourself as a player. And like we said before, those best players seek it out and then they act upon it.
The thing that impresses me most when I look at young players is how well they can be a role player. So one of the things that I care a whole lot about is, do they cheer on the bench? When a sub happened, do they come up and congratulate or just high-five their teammates? Do they look happy when their teammates score and perhaps they haven't had the same opportunity or haven't had the ball touches? And I think just being a great role player, like being a 6th man or being the 9th man and not knowing when you're going to get on, but you got to stay warm, that shows a lot of character. And every team ultimately needs role players, and it often doesn't take a lot of talent to be, because to be the superstar to score 30 points is hard.
Yeah.
But anyone can stand up and cheer. Anyone can high five. In your view, do you pay attention to that distinction between
all the
being
time.
a star and being a role player?
All the time, yeah. It's mammoth because you look at like juniors who are typically first years and second years. As a first year, you might not get as much time, and then you might pout and have these poor behaviours on the bench. But then when you're a second year and you're got more opportunity or playing time, then you change. That's a bit of a red flag. Because
another thing is like the talk on defense, like, just communication and
making the extra pass. Like, did I shoot the ball when someone else was more open and I just shot it because I didn't trust my teammate? Yes, I'm probably better. Maybe at 14 years old as an under 16, maybe I'm the better player and I should shoot it all the time to win. But again, that's not trusting a teammate. That's a bit of a red flag of how they are in a group. Because when you go to seniors, like you say, NBL1 is an example, there's one or two players who probably are going to score 20. Probably two at the most. And then the rest are rebounders playing defense. Maybe they get 5 or 6 assists. Maybe they're getting steals. How are they contributing to a winning team? And I forget the saying, but it's sort of along the lines of like, where your feet are. Do you know what I mean? Like, you got to play and be your best where your feet are. Not in the future next year, like, because I'm a first year and I'm not going to play and I'm off the bench, do I have a poor attitude and just give up and think about next year? I need to be where my feet are and be the best version of me now, because it'll come out in the wash eventually.
Totally agree. And when I think about like state team selections of like, say, a team of 10, the top 7 players are usually quite confirmed, whereas the final 3 spots, probably like 7 or 8 kids could fill that spot. And
that's pretty
it
reasonable.
almost doesn't really matter because they're not going to get much court time. So what they need is players who are going to cheer on the bench, who are going to be the glue guy, who's going to hustle, go in for those 2 minutes and draw a charge and that kind of stuff. And it's like, I just think, I just wonder from your perspective how you instill that appreciation for doing the grunt work where you may not need to score 30 points to be a part of a state team and have that wonderful experience, right?
Yeah, I think as a coach, and again, probably most would do it subconsciously, that you create a value system in your team. So what do you cheer? What do you applaud? What do you comment on? So for me, I'm very, I don't shout a lot during a game. I don't know if you've seen me coach games, but I'm not like jumping along the sideline telling you everything to do. I expect you to know it to a point because I've done that at practice. But if you set a great screen and Jimmy comes off and hits a 3, Dave, great screen. That's what I shout out from the sideline. So you're running down the court, so you know that I've seen it, you know that I value it, and the other players hear that. I'm not saying Darcy or, he's a shooter we got now that I think of. Darcy, great 3. Yes, that's a great shot that he made it, but also
everyone can see that,
I'm creating value. I'm creating value on getting deflections. I'm creating value on playing one-on-one defense where you can guard a guy for 5 seconds and he dribbles and he can't get around you and then he has to give the ball up. And Dave, great great job. You kept him in front. Like, seeing it, valuing it, and commenting on it. And again, I'm not jumping and screaming and making a song and dance. I'm just saying something. But the other players go, oh, Will really likes when Dave plays defense. Maybe I'll do that. So it's creating a value system for all of those things. Everyone wants to love scoring the ball, It's human nature of, I want to score, I want to shoot. So can I create value in other areas that don't naturally have value?
And I think it is understandable for kids to want their coach to think highly of them and to have that appreciation matters a great deal.
Yeah.
Certainly when I was going through and wanting to make state teams, like say if I made a 3, I would kind of sneakily look at whether the coach was looking, But, they're things that you don't want to admit, but it is true, it's human nature to want others to notice that we're doing such a good job. So it's great to hear that you pay attention to that, and I'm sure that benefits a lot of kids.
And timeouts is another key time for doing that. Like, coming to the timeout, you might have 2 or 3 things in your mind you want to cover off, but I can say, hey Dave, great pick and roll coverage. That was perfect show and recover. They got nothing out of it. We played to a scout. You forced that guy left. He still made a shot, but Dave, that's our scout. You did it. Well done. Just saying those little comments for 10 seconds just to hit those players can make them know that they're doing all right. Yeah.
The podcast is to give you a legacy-worthy interview, and obviously you've done so much in your life that in an hour or two we can't capture everything, but do you feel like there's any core components that you would want to keep in this recording? And if not, I've got some final questions to wrap it up. Do you have a message for Harrison for when he's older and listens to this?
Cheers. Yeah, you're going deep on all these questions, Dave. It's good. Probably just, you got to find what you love and you got to cling on to it. Again, if I go back to when I moved to China, I realized that basketball was it for me, and very few days have felt like work since. And I mean that like it's a good thing. I'm happy to come to the Arc today because, yes, I have lots to do, but it's basketball and I love it, and it doesn't feel like a huge chore. Obviously, there's bits and pieces of every job, but you need to find what you genuinely love, what makes you get out of bed, what makes you go the extra yard, like you say, stay after training and do whatever. You got to find that and you got to love it and you got to do it and not worry about, you're not earning money or you're not doing all these materialistic things that others maybe want you to do. Again, staying true to yourself probably is a big key thing. And just being good to people. Like, there's so much nastiness and craziness in the world that, I think there is a value in just being honest and true to one another, and people can feel that when you are that way.
Good advice for Harrison, and I'll be curious to hear his reactions to this podcast as he gets a bit older. Okay, well, a few final ones to wrap up, and it will give you an opportunity to kind of further share the person you are and, who you're, kind of what your values are. But what's the best investment under $100 that you have ever made?
Probably books. Yeah.
What are 2 or 3 words that you hope comes to people's mind when they hear Will Smith?
Probably integrity, of just doing what I say I'll do, doing the right thing. You never have to worry about what my intentions or motives are. I think integrity probably sums that up. Fun. As much as all this is hard work, I still like to have a laugh. I still like to have fun. Again, that's part of that journey of, let's not just work our butts off for 2 years and then have fun. It's how can we work our butts off and still have fun and look around, and smell the roses as you're going along. So fun's probably a second one. Third one, maybe just giving.
Who's your favourite NBA player?
Right now or ever?
Ever.
Probably Michael Jordan.
And now?
I do like Steph Curry, how he plays. But Sean Kemp was a huge favourite of mine, just behind Michael Jordan when I was younger.
Who would you say are your role models, either celebrity or just in your personal life?
I've always loved Phil Jackson as a coach. I really like all the Zen stuff that he went into. Sacred Hoops, we talk about books. That's an amazing book. I suggest you read it if you haven't. It goes into like the Bulls and all the funky stuff he did with them, meditation and whatever. And I know that got me into trying meditation when I never had before. So he's probably a big one. I'd say Jay Wright, Coach K, Calipari, like those college coaches, again, are probably in that realm of moulding young boys into young men in that sort of 17 to 20, 21 age group. And I find what they do with all that really interesting. Yeah, but probably, I can't think of any others.
What are you most proud of in your life so far?
Wow. Probably there's been a few times where I've stood up for what I really believed in as being right, and I stood up and I didn't cave in.
And final question and opportunity for you to share any final message, but what's a message, quote, or saying you wish every child would internalize and every parent, coach, teacher, adult role model would promote?
Wow. Quote. Probably, I always liked, from a basketball perspective, the Rudyard Kipling Jungle Book. The strength of the wolf is a pack, and the strength of the pack is a wolf. I always found that saying very important for, again, the team side of basketball, that the individual is great, but the team is important, and the team is great, and the individual is important. I like those two sides of it. I've also found the If poem very important as well. Do you know If? I believe it's the same guy. Should we Google it? No. If, yeah, Google it. If poem.
Great, and it reminds me of the African proverb, I believe, that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together.
Yeah, that's a really good one. The If one is about, like, if you can hear all the noise and also have your own thoughts and put the two together, that's great. If you can fill dull moments with introspective thought, then, you know, you're basically become a man. Like, it's a bit of a boy to man type of poem, or you might say young woman to woman, of being able to do things for yourself whenever it's boring. Like, don't just cop out and say it's boring. What do I do? It's like, you should always be able to find something to do. Again, let's say we go to the toilet. Can I listen to a podcast? Can I read 10 pages of a book? Can I fill every little moment, every slither of time with something that makes me better?
Thank you, Will. And I know I'm not alone in kind of appreciating all the extra efforts that you always put in. And certainly when I as I was growing up, the coaches that I've had have had a tremendous impact on the person I am today. And, you know, youth coaches play such a significant role, and it's those moments that you talk about, like, do coaches acknowledge you setting a screen, playing defense, arriving early, seeking feedback? I think it is so special, and I know that you tend to get a bit stressed at times, understandable given the workload, but hopefully you also can take moments like other coaches to also just be proud of what your hard work is doing. And lots of young boys especially may not have the maturity to vocalize or appreciate it at this age, but I know that certainly as they get older and they get more life experience, they look back very fondly at these days. So thank you for all that you do, and it's been great meeting you, learning from you, and thank you for always being so encouraging and supportive.
No worries. Thank you, Dave. Like you say, I hope the same thing, that, yeah, they look back and see things that maybe were hard or lessons you tried to teach, and they realise it at some point. And I think we call it that airport moment of, you could not see someone for 5-10 years and you bump into them in an airport and you can have a talk for 10 or 15 minutes and reminisce about those things. I think those are winning moments in life.
And you have plenty more winning moments. Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Dave.